Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumos Perek Beis Halacha Aleph. We are learning today Daf Chai, Daf Yud Ches, starting Mamish on top of the Amid. We just came off a lot of nuance regarding the Mishnah's exceptions. The Tanakam of the Mishnah begins with the rule that Ein Toirmin min hatoir ala tamei. Then the Mishnah gave the first of the exceptions, that if you have a round cake of pressed figs, round cake is the eagle. You have an eagle and it has in it already some figs that are tahor and some figs that are tamei, you are allowed to separate min hatahor al hatamei. The Gemara now will introduce the following question: what will happen, halkop, if you have two such igulim? You have two of these round cakes. Each one has in it some figs that are tahor, some figs that are tamei. Both of them are tevel. Cake one, cake two. You're separating from cake one min hatahor al hatamei. You are already taking min hatahor al hatamei. Are you, in this case, also allowed to take from the tahor of cake one for the tamei of cake two? In other words, here you can argue that, normally we say you can't do that because truma has to be taken min hamukav. Perhaps it's already min hamukav because they are the same. Since halachically they are the same, could be you should be allowed to take off from one for the other. The Gemara, to resolve this inquiry, will introduce us to a Mishnah that we will have in the beginning of the 4th chapter. We're going to actually learn that Mishnah today inside together. The Mishnah there speaks about, this is important, you have a pile of tevel, grain. And like we said, that even though midai raisa, any amount suffices for you to fulfill the obligation of truma, midrabanan, the Chachamim want us to take, on average, 2%, 1 from 50. 100 sa would mean you should remove 2 sa. For whatever reason, a person knowingly only removed 1 sa. They did one act of separation. And then they say to themselves, you know what? I want to take off the other sa from this pile. We're going to learn more details in a couple of moments when we learn it inside. Not so simple. It's not so simple.
What's the time? What's the time between the two exchanges?
I don't think it's about time. It's about one act versus 2 acts of separation.
And then
when I take off one act of separation, that's my hafrasha. When I finish, whether I began by kriya shem and then physical, whether I began with the physical and then kriya shem, I did my act of separation. Now, if you think about it, midrabanan kevan, 1 saw is misakin, how much? 50. You have 100. So what do you really have here? You have misukan, right? Chulin, but then you have a tevel. Now, can you take from misukan for tevel, Aviv? No, because you cannot take truma from something that's already exempt for something that's obligated. You can't be mafresh min hatur ala chiyuv. So when you take the second saw, the question will be, how do we view it? Maybe you're taking from the 50 that's already rectified. If you would be doing that, then you can't do it. We're going to have in the Mishnah 2 opinions. And actually, let's already quote that in the Gemara, Daf Lamed Dalid, there'll be a Braisa that quotes a 3rd opinion. And we're going to see how those 3 opinions come back and correlate to the opening question of these 2 round cakes. That will be topic number 1 today. Topic number 2 today will be more details about the law of min hamukaf. Min hamukaf means min hasamochloi. Min hasamochloi ideally, or in most cases, will actually mean that whatever it is that you are separating from should be touching each other. Right? So we're going to have a lot of details about that. I just want to say right now in the intro, and we'll repeat it when we learn inside, that there is a halacha of challah that's similar, but not the same. By challah, for me to be chayev, to be mafresh challah, noch mit abracha, let's go with the opinion that says you have to start out with a minimum of 5 pounds of flour. What I'm saying now is not according to all opinions. Some people hold that even if you have only 4 pounds of flour, you have to make a bracha when you separate challah, but there is a minimum amount, Aviv, and if you're making a dough which has lesser than that amount, you're exempt. What happens if I have 2 or 3 little doughs? If they would all be together, I would have the minimum amount. Let me go with my 5 pounds. But I have 3 different batches. Each batch is 2 pounds. So there, the word is not mukaf, but there we're looking to be mitzaref, to combine them. You have other halachas over there. How do you combine them? Does it have to be touching? No. We're going to see by challah that if they are all covered by the same cover, if they are all in the same keli, the keli is mitzaref them. I'm just bringing this up now and more again when we learn the Gemara inside, even though min hamukaf is similar, it's similar, but not the same. And the Gemara today is going to tell you the limit of min hamukaf. Of course, if they touch, even better. But it doesn't have to be that way. We'll see at what point do we say and do we not say what's the limit of it's no longer min hamukaf. The third topic today will be, we're going to go back to the Mishnah. I know we're already spending a couple of days and we keep on starting every day this year with the rule of the Tanakama of the Mishnah that what? That ein toiremin min hatoir alatame. I'm just quoting the words in the Mishnah of the Tana Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer oimer that toiremin min hatoir alatame. Rabbi Eliezer argues with everything we have been learning until now. When we read this in the Mishnah, we correctly said, hold on, don't jump. Rabbi Eliezer's leniency is not in all of the cases. Actually, we'll begin today, and we're going to continue tomorrow. There's going to be a machloikis, bishitas Rabbi Eliezer, defining and limiting exactly where did Rabbi Eliezer say that you could be toirem min hatoir alatame, and where may you not, like the Tanakama, Lukula Alma, not be toirem min hatoir alatame. Today we're going to learn the first understanding in Rabbi Eliezer. It has to do with lach or yavesh. Here again, if we'll have time, we'll just make it clear that lach and yavesh, moist, liquid, and solids, as these terms will be used today, will not be the same, again, similar but not the same of how we use these terms. For example, in Hilchos Shabbos, right, when it comes to bishul, ein bishul achar bishul, right? Belach, beyavesh. We'll see how much time we have. It's important just to remember that certain words that are the same, used in different halachas, don't necessarily mean the same thing. Okay, that is today's daf. Let's go inside daf Yud Ches on the top. So the Gemara begins with the following question. So Dr. Bob, if you have a round cake of pressed figs that have in it some figs that are tahor, some figs that are tamei, the Mishnah says you can separate truma from the pure figs for all of it, even for the impure, because they are in one cake. What happens? If you begin with 2 of such round cakes of pressed figs, I'm aware that the words of the Gemara and the way I'm translating it into English are not exactly the same, but so many understand in the words of the Gemara, not one is part tamei. One is part tamei implies part tahor. The other is part tahor implies part tamei. Basically, it means that both of these cakes are the same. It doesn't matter the quantity of how much tahor, how much tamei, they are the same, that each one has some tamei and some tahor. So the Gemara wonders, anyways, on cake number 1, you are taking min hatahir of it, for the tamei of it, even though we learned in the Mishnah that if you have 2 distinct piles, you cannot remove pure for impure. You get that? Here, maybe halachically, we should not view these cakes as distinct cakes because they are identical. They are halachically identical, even though they are distinct. Maybe the fact that they are identical, they become one. If they become one aviv, then you should be allowed to. let me add a nuance. According to the Rash, the Rishon Rash, Rabbeinu Shimshon, who says that the whole halacha of the Tanakam is only midrabanan, and the reason is because since truma has to be separated min hamukov, well, if you're going to separate min hatoyer alatame, you might bring both piles together, and what will you do, Aviv? You're going to be metame. You're going to add truma. You can also explain the question. Okay, I have these two cakes. I know that part of it is started, part of it is tamei. I know that truma has to be min hamukov, which means that if I'm taking off truma from one pile for the other, they have to be in close proximity. I'll bring them together. I'll touch the tamei part to the tamei part. So I'm not going to add to anything tamei. There's a point of connection where they are alike. You're good. That's the kash. Gavaldik. So the Gemara says, V'yeva kahada, a Talmud Yerushalmi expression. Let me bring a similar case and perhaps connect one to the other. Instead of learning it inside, I want to first, we have time. I want to go to Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis. We are going to the beginning of the 4th chapter of Masechtas Trumas. And even though what I'm reading right now is not the words we have in the Gemara, I know that. But everything is based on the following. So here is what happens. Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, all the way in the bottom of the Amud, Hamafresh mixas truma umaisris. Even though we are saying trumas umaisris, for the topic of to make this relevant to our topic, let's not add the maisris part. It's not relevant right now, even though it's the same logic. We'll learn it properly when we get up to Daf Lamed Beis. Let me just focus on the truma. So here we go, doctor. I have a pile, let's say, of 100 sa'ah of grain. Tevel, meaning none of the tithings were separated. The first separation has to be truma, to be given to the kohen. The sages say that we should give approximately 2%. I have 100 sa'ah, I should be giving 2 sa'ah. For whatever reason, hamafresh mixas trumas umaisres, as an example, a person decided knowingly, even though really I should take off 2 of these measurements, I only took off 1. I took off part. I made an act of afrosh. Now the person says, well, really only part of the remaining pile is rectified. I want to rectify the whole pile. So I want to take off another saw. No, not so simple. The Tanakama holds, now what's not so simple? Right, Aviv, you got this? 50 saw is already rectified. You're not allowed to take truma from a rectified product for an unrectified product. Now, it's all mixed together, but one might argue there's nothing you can do. How can you take a saw from the 99 that remained, right? One saw you took off. How can you do that? Maybe you'll be taking off from the misukan for the tevel. So the Tanakama holds you could, but there's a limit. Moitzi mimenu truma olav, avoloi lamakam acher. To rectify the remaining 99, to do a second act from the pile for the pile, the Tanakama says that you could do. Because halachically, we're going to say that the second one that you took off came from the tevel in it. I can accept that. But what happens if I have 2 piles of tevel, 100 and 100? You with me? And I only took off from pile A 1 saw for pile A. Now I'm saying to myself, listen, pile A is not fully rectified, which it's not. So I still have to be mafresh from pile A. Well, now that I'm taking off from pile A, let me add even more for pile B. If I would have, from the outset, wanted to take off from A for A and B, as long as they are min hamukaf, I can do that. What would I do? I would take off 4 sa'ah from pile A for both. Says the Tanakama, no. Once you did part, now that you're doing a second act, you can only do it for it. You can't do it for the neighboring. Tanakama. Rav Meir Oimer? No. Af moitziu lemakem acher trumas umaisres. No. Why should it make a difference? Once you are allowed to take off from A for A, that means that we are saying that when you're going to take a hafrasha, you're taking it from the tevel. Well, if you're taking it from the tevel, then you can take it for pile number 2. Okay. Now, on Daf Lamed Dalid Amud Aleph, the Gemara will bring a third Tana, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and I'm quoting his words from Daf Lamed Daled. Eini moitzi olav, eini moitzi loy olav v'loy al makam acher. He's the most machmer. He says not only can you not take off from A for B, you can't even take from A for A, like we said, because the A now is a mixture of tevel and chulin. How do you know what you're taking it from? Can't take anything else. You cannot be mafresh anymore from A for A. Now, guys, that doesn't mean that you're trapped. I want to tell you, because there is a solution. The solution is you can take the akir from B for B and A. But that's not the point right now. So we have these three opinions. Now let's read it back in our Gemara. The Yeva Mikado. See, the Gemara is just giving the case. He's not quoting the Mishnah, but he's giving the case of the Mishnah. Because when Rav Meir says that you can take off from it and for the neighboring, the Tanna Kama says you can only take from A for A, but not from A for B. That means we have two piles. That if a person has two piles of produce, and pile A was partially rectified, now here he's giving a case that pile A, you removed one instead of two aviv, and then this genius went to pile B, and he also only removed one instead of two. I mean, that's the case that we're going to have. We're making this similar to our case of the two igulim. You see the similarity? Because every eagle has part tahor, part tamei. It's the same. It's not the same, but there is a similarity. So again, echad hifresh mimenu mixas trumas u'maisres, ve'echad hifresh mimenu mixas trumas u'maisres. And if you want to ask over there the same question, Ma'u sheyitrei mizeh al zeh, are you able to take over from one to the other? And let me now say the answer. The Gemara doesn't even give it, but the way we will learn the Gemara, it's self-understood. That's the machloikes between the Tanna Kama, Rav Meir, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. I'll just say it by heart. According to the Tanna Kama, you are allowed to take, he says clearly, from pile A for pile A, but you can't take you can't take from A to B. You can take from B for B, but you cannot take from B for A. And therefore, l'chu'ura, according to the Tanna Kama, you cannot take from one cake for the other. Even though the Mishnah gave it the exception that you can take from this eagle that has mixas tahor or mixas tamei, you can take from the tahor and the tamei for its pile, tahor, tamei, same case over there. There you have a kri that is mixas chulin, mixas tevel. You can resolve it, but not for a neighboring. According to Rabbi Meir, what could you do? Not only can you take from A for A, Rav Meir says you can take it from one on the other. So, l'cho'ira, that's what the Gemara is trying to say. According to many here, same thing will be by these two igulim, that according to the Tana Rabbi Meir, you will be allowed to take from one eagle, the tahor from one eagle, not only for all of the eagle, but also for the neighboring eagle, even for the tamei and the neighboring eagle. Says the Gemara, Talmidoi de Rabbi Ruba, one of the students of the great Rabbi. Sha'alun le Rabbi, he asked this question. This question means the question of two igulim, the way we are learning. In other words, the question of the two piles is avada. There's no question. That's the machloikes Tanna Kama Rav Meir, whether you can take from one pile to the other. That's not a question. So someone asked regarding the two igulim, V'amar loin, and he told him, now one way of understanding his response is that Rabbi Ruba didn't paskin like the Tanna Kama, doesn't paskin like Rabbi Meir. He paskins like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, whose opinion is quoted in a Braisa brought on Daf Lamed Dalid, that says that you can't even rectify pile A for pile A. Can't take off. So he told him, you're asking whether you can take from one on the other. What are you talking about? And he answered by quoting a pasuk that Aksil, that the fool, choivek es yadav, the fool folds his hands, meaning he does things which makes him trapped, and v'oichel es pesari, and all he can eat is flesh. the understanding of that is that in the case of the two piles, paskin by the two piles, you took off mixas like you fool. There's nothing you go eat yourself. You can't fix. There's nothing you can do. In other words, that's one way of understanding it. Another way of understanding it, and look inside in Mara Fulda. Look inside the Mara Fulda, the first line under the Gemara. Rabbi told the student, "Hakasil chayvekes yodav umitztayed al chinam." Why? A whole different understanding. He says only a fool thinks that he's trapped, but he's a fool to think that he's trapped. Many people in life think that they're trapped. Sometimes they are really trapped. Sometimes it's because of their lack of wisdom. Like, you fool, you're folding your hands, you're saying, Nebach, nothing I can do, but you're mitztayed al chinam. Lefi she'ein lo havana liyashav sveika shaloi. What's even the question? Sheshayla hazois pshutehi she'asur. Not that he paskins like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but that Rabbi Chia paskins like the Tanakama. The Tanakama says that you can remove for it, but not for its neighbor. So what's the question? No, you can't take from one on the other, but you can take one for itself. Or this, he flows even better. There's another version of what he answered. One version is that we don't understand what he meant when he quoted the pasuk that the fool, pasuk in Koheles, the fool folds, is trapped. He can only fold his hands and do nothing. Rabbi Lazar, b'shem Rabbi Chia Rabba says no. He answered befedish that ain't trein uma asin mizelze. I paskin like the Tanakama, not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Just for the record, many years ago, someone who learns with us on YouTube corrected me. I used to, every time I said Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, I would say the Kavanaki. Kavanaki means that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is like a relatively small amount of the best flour in the world. Kav is a small measure. Naki means it's clear, the best flour, which means that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is not quoted that often, but whenever he's quoted, we paskin like him. And just to know, two things. First of all, we only paskin like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov when he's quoted in the Mishnah. Doesn't always mean that we paskin like him when he's quoted in a Braisa. And the biggest, that I always knew, but I got corrected, and I want to just share it again, that there were two Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakovs. And not every Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is the Kavanaki. I'm saying this because, for sure, according to Rabbi Lazar, b'shem Rabbi Chia Ruba, Rabbi Chia is not paskening like the second statement, Vadai. He's not paskening like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. He's saying that ain't troidim u'ma'aser mizeh al zeh, but you could be troidim u'ma'aser on it. No, it's I paskin like the Tanakama. The bottom line will be the same. The Gemara is saying that just like on the Sugyan Pedek Revi, when you have a part tevel, part chulin pile, you cannot be troidim from one pile for another similar pile. Same thing over here. These two igulim, miktsasei tahir or miktsasei tamei, you cannot be troidim from one for the other, even though you could be troidim from one on itself. That for sure is the understanding of Rabbi Lazar, whether the first version is that he's saying like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, or the first version is that he's actually saying, you fool, you're wondering whether you can be troidim from one on the other. You can't even be troidim from for itself. That might be that on.
So based on that, on which Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov are you referring to?
The Gemara quotes him on Daf Lamed Dalet. All I meant to say, Yakiris, is that when you learn, whoever will learn the first time that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is Kavanaki, the meaning of that is Kav. Actually, someone told me that throughout the whole Mishnayos, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is quoted 106 times. That's the Kav, Kuvav, which is relatively a small amount of time. And Naki means halachic k'moise. So that's number one. Then you begin learning times that we don't paskin like him. So then I'm being told, we only paskin like him when he's quoted in the Mishnah, not when he's quoted in the Braisa. Then the last thing, which was very important, when he's quoted in the Mishnah, there were two Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakovs. If this, I have to check up again which one was the Kavanaki, the earlier one or the later one. But Lav Dafki, even when he's quoted in the Mishnah, you have to know which one is he before you jump and say, if it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the Kavanaki, we paskin like him. Okay, now let's go weiter. So that's the first topic. The second topic today is Min HaMukaf. Min HaMukaf means that when you separate Truma, whatever you are separating truma for has to be in very close proximity. We'll see. Ideally touching, or at least halachically touching. What does that mean? So says the Gemara. We're beginning with the Braisa. If you have different types of products in one kupa, in a box. Now, don't forget, it's a given. I cannot separate truma from one type for another type. So the examples that we're using over here is one has vegetables. Just for the record, according to all opinions, the tithings of vegetables is midrabanan. And you see that even though it's only midrabanan, the din of min hamukaf stands the same. So the example we are giving is a person has cabbage, but what he has is, let's say he has cabbage, then he has carrots, and he has potatoes, and he has whatever, and then he has cabbage. So you have cabbage in the same basket, but the top layer and the bottom layer are being separated by another type. Can you separate from the top for the bottom? Obviously, the question is from the bottom to the top, which is not practical. In other words, do we say that since they are in one kupa, it's min hamukaf? Or do we say, even though they are in one keli, there is something that's intervening? And the Braisa says the latter. Wow. Kruv mil mailon, kruv mil maton, cabbage on the top, cabbage on the bottom. The davar acher beemsa, that's the issue. There's something intervening. Says the Braisa, ein toirmin, v'loy ma'asrem izeh al zeh. Want you to know that the Pnei Moshe takes out the word ma'asrem, as we have been learning, right, Aviv? Last week, that's the whole vart. That ma'aser doesn't have to be min hamukaf. That's why by ma'aser you could give min hatohor al hatamei, because there's no min hamukaf. So now, others actually have it in here, and that really would mean that there is a machloikis whether min hamukav applies to ma'aser or not. There is a machloikis, and that begins with whether this braisa has the girsa the way we have it inside, ein toirim v'loy ma'asrin, or like the Pnei Moshe, he found a version where the words ma'asrim is not here, and that fits. We're going to go with that because it just fits with the shita that we have been learning throughout the sugi. So Rabbi Mendel is just making a good point. We're going, guys. What we're saying is not L'Kula Alma. We're going with the shita of the Rash, Rabbeinu Shimshon the Rishon, that min hamukav is all because you want to be able to approximate the 2%, and for you to approximate, they have to be in close proximity. So Rabbi Mendel is asking, hold on, if it's in the same basket, do you not see it? Okay, first of all, good point. I would argue that maybe it's harder to approximate when there's something intervening, because there's a lot of stuff. You can say that. Now, hold on. Comes the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Hado de Teimar, B'she'ein sham cholol. What does that imply? Only the problem is not empty space in between them. That's not the problem. What is the problem? Davar acher. Which means you have to appreciate how the Gemara works things different. In other words, the issue of min hamukav is not that they physically have to touch. The issue of min hamukav is because something else is intervening. But if the issue is only that yeh sham chalol, that means if you have a large utensil and you have on one part cabbage and you have on the other part the cabbage, they're not touching each other. But there's nothing intervening them. Now,
I want to just move.
Just wait a moment, second. Here it's easier to understand, but they are in the same utensil. The utensil combines them, and therefore, in other words, min hamukav does not demand contact. Min hamukav demands nothing should be intervening.
I want to just move.
Like by challah, for you to combine the doughs that we spoke about in the introduction, they have to be in a keli. We're going to see as the Gemara progresses that by truma min hamukav, it doesn't even have to be in a keli. It has to be in something that combines it. But what we do learn from the beginning, from the opening shot, is that even if they are contained, even in a utensil, which is the strongest container, it's in a keli, if something is choitzitz beinayim, it ruins the min hamukav. Not since it's in a keli, it doesn't matter. Fakert. The chatzitza trumps the keli. Now, does it have to be in a keli? Can it be on the table? By challah, it's not enough for me to have on a countertop 3 doughs of 2 pounds each. They will not be connected. I want you to know. They have to be either covered with one cover or they have to be in one utensil. I don't know. Here, we don't need that much. Because the words that Chazal use by challah is they have to be mitzuraf, they have to be combined. Minamukav does not mean combined. Minamukav means in close proximity. Normally it means to put them, to touch them. But it doesn't have to be the touch. Now you can make your common kevan.
Oh, isn't it a quick solution just to move the vegetable? I don't know what.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there's no problem in it. Yeah.
So on the other case, as far as challah, aren't they all in one keli, the house being the keli?
Oh, very good. By challah, we don't say the house is a keli, and by minamukav, we will say the house is a keli. Thank you, Kevin. Perfect. No, okay. I want to make it clear. We're going to learn Summa Sechtas Challah that minamukav demands less than what's needed for challah, but it demands something. So it's similar, but not the same. Now, another example, and this is for Gabriel. Guys, Shira wine, let me tell you, is the best wine. I just finished Shabbos, the Shira wine, and I had a Herzog wine. I love Herzog Amata, but it's not the same. Day and night, mamish. You cannot be toidim from Herzog on Shira, for sure not. That's called. All right, now, next case. Kol beis hagitois echad. A wine, you have a wine press. I'm talking about a house. The wine press itself is mitzaref everything. What do I mean? You can have in a wine press, you can have 20 vats. We're talking about different kalim. By challah, it would not work, right? Every vat is a different pocket. Since they are all in the same gas, singular, plural, base hagitois, that's with the tov, the house combines them. Now here it's also, guys, there is nothing intervening it. What I mean to say is that the house is a wine press. I'm not talking about my house, Dafka, because my house, I have bottles of wine, I have bottles of oil, I have other stuff. That's like a chatzitza. Now, a wine press, does it only have vats of wine? No, but all of the utensils there are for wine. That's the pshat of the base hagitois. Another example, so the third example, this is already going to be challenged or limited, that kol base hageroinois echad. Let me tell you what a goyden means. A goyden means a pile on a threshing floor. I want to tell you, a threshing floor is flat. In other areas of halacha, we differentiate between a receptacle that has a base kibul, not flat, not pshutei kleyates, versus flat. The biggest chiddush is that a threshing floor also combines, which would mean that if you have different piles of grain on one threshing floor, that's already min hamukav, but we'll see some details about that. The house is like a keli, I think, because there's walls. You can never have something that's choitzitz, ever. But even if it's not choitzitz, by the cabbage, the keli is mitzaref, even though there's ear in between. By the base agitois, the house combines. The chiddush is the goring. However, for this, we're going to have to already limit. In other words, let me say the first thing. What type of threshing floor combines the piles in it? If it's currently, these will be the words, a functioning threshing floor. We'll define that in a moment. If it's now no longer a functioning threshing floor, then it will not combine it. Then they have to actually touch. Tani, we learned in a Braisa, Amar Rabbi Yudah, that's a Tana Rabbi Yudah, have a turn to that Yud Chesamid Beis, Nachanes, it's getting a bit late. For who, when do we say again that a functioning threshing floor combines different piles of grain? And that means that they are min hamukaf. They don't physically have to touch. For who, shetehei toifeses hagoyden be'emsa. That's only if other contents of the threshing floor are still on the threshing floor in between the piles. I like the picture that Kevin is putting up. And when we're speaking about other contents, let me begin with the normal contents that were there. What was done on the threshing floor? They would harvest the grain, right? They would make bundles. That's the whole law we learned in Peah. People can forget the bundles. They would gather all the bundles and put them on the threshing floor. Now these piles are the stalks, are the shibalim that have in it kernels, but it's a staff that's straw, and there's a lot of klipa surrounding every kernel. You bring animals to trample on, to thresh, thus threshing floor. Then you have to winnow. Even after you winnowed, some of the straw will fall down on the threshing floor. You did the best to separate, but it's not perfect separation. Now, whether you made one pile or whether you made 10 piles or 2 piles, as long as you at least have some of the straw on the threshing floor, that's what he's saying. That's the toifeses hagoyim be'emsa. So it's a functioning threshing floor. What are we saying? We're saying like this. Let me say the opposite. That if you swept away all of the klipa, you're done with threshing. You're just using the floor as a storage, and you have different piles. Then it's not called minamukov. Additional things are better. Additional things makes the floor cold. It's still functioning. It's still using. We're still in the middle of the season. We're still in the middle of working it. Even though it's flat, it combines it. See, buy a keli. I don't care if there's nothing in between the cabbage. The keli combines it. By the base, hagas, the house combines the vets. On the threshing floor, a functional threshing floor combines it. Now, the Gemara, when I said that as long as you have at least some straw, some klipa, you're good. Initially, the Gemara thought you have to actually have still kernels of grain. At kedoin chitim, the way we're going to read it. Not only is it true if you have kernels of grain on the floor, do we then call that floor a functioning threshing floor? We're reading it the way that Rashi really reads it. But va'afilu kash, va'afilu teven, even if what you have in between the piles is not something that's edible, it's not something of value, but you didn't clear out the area, which means you might still be using it for another bundle, maybe from your field, maybe from a neighboring field. Even, that's the way he learns, even if you only have kash, even if you have teven, the fact that you still have stuff on the threshing floor, that is what qualifies the floor to be a functional threshing floor. And if 2 or 3 piles are on a functional threshing floor, you have min hamukaf. You have min hamukaf, even though they're not physically touching. That's the way he learns the Gemara. Whoever's using an art scroll has a different understanding, but let's go right.
How about if you have 2 or 3 piles on the threshing floor, which are already done? That means that they become storage till you move them.
Correct. Done meaning, yeah, correct.
Well, then, therefore, you can't combine them.
That's not true. That's what we're saying.
Well,
when I have a vat in a wine press, it's done. It's finished. It's chayiv. It's tevel. Once the wine descends into the vat, you're chayiv to be trading.
I see what you're saying.
No, it was the item that very good, Kevin. Even though the item already reached its gemar melacha, which is why you're chayiv to tithe it, the fact that they are in something, that something combines them. A keli combines them. A house combines them. Even outdoors, even flat, the threshing floor combines them, and that's where we have the limitation. Now, Rabbi Chagai asked in front of Rabbi Yosi, Hoya Tama be'emsa, that's gavaldik. Guys, you have, let's just speak about 3. Just a mashal. You have tohoid on the right side of the threshing floor. You have tohoid, another pile on the left side. It's a functioning threshing floor. But you have a tummy pile in middle. What did we learn in the beginning when we began Menamukov? That even if you have a keli, cabbage, potatoes in middle, you can't do it. Now, here it's not another min, it's grain. But the grain is tamei. What did we learn in our Mishnah? You cannot be toidem, for sure not min hatamei al hatoid. According to the Tanakama, you cannot be toidem min hatoid al hatamei. Since halachically the middle pile of tamei cannot be combined with the others, is that considered a chatzitza? What a great question. So Rabbi Yosi answered, Amalei, now we're going to read it, B'lashon bitmiya, v'hainu nashuch, are these piles biting into each other? Meaning, by challah, we already mentioned, there the combination is a greater type of combination. One of the ways we define combination by challah, even though I mentioned before, correctly so, halachically, even if they're not touching each other, if they're covered, if they're on a keli, don't forget here, the threshing floor is not covered, it's not a keli, it's a flat floor. By challah, when the two doughs touch each other, even if they're physically touching, if the touch is so light that if you were to separate them, one does not bite into the other. Biting into the other by a dough halachically means that by a dough, if they touch enough, when you'll separate them, it won't be a smooth separation. The place of contact like adheres one to the other. So when you separate them, you got that aviv. Like it's not clean. Either one side will bite into the other. If you don't have that, it's not called connected. So he's trying to say that just like we find by challah a high demand of connection, even though by truma min hamukav does not demand such a big connection, but will it be the equivalent of nashuch? Of course not, because we don't combine toir and tamei, and therefore it's not min hamukav. Beautiful. Next, Chavran boy kamei Rabbi Yosi. The Chevra asked Rabbi Yosi, again, back to the threshing floor. It's functional. You have the straw on the floor. There's nothing tummy in between, but there's a curtain. There's a mappa. Hoya mappa be'emsa. The Gemara says a mappa is not a problem. That's gavaldik. You know, you can see it, but one cannot see the other. There's a curtain intervening. So Amaloin, Vahainu Chamisha Sakin Bagoiden. Hold on. What happens if you are ready, like Kevin was saying, you made a pile. Let's go to the next step. What do you think you do? If people are coming to buy your product from the threshing floor, you don't have to put it in a bag. If you're planning to take it from your threshing floor to the market to sell it for even a better price, you're not going to sell it wholesale, you're going to sell it retail, you're going to package it. Is the package a chatzitza? No. Because what's the purpose of the package? It's serving the product inside of it. You see, cabbage, and potatoes, it's different. It's a chatzitza. Something that's here for the service of the food is bottled to the food. Beautiful. And therefore, we learned in the Braisa that if you have 5 sacks on the goyden, says the Braisa, and again, machlokes in the Gersois, the typical Yerushalmi, again, according to the Pnei Moshe, you take off ma'aser because of course you're ma'aser. We don't say that the bag is a chatzitza. We don't say that. Now, what I'm saying now really needs a lot more time to discuss, which would be, and they discuss it over here. Buy a bag, the bag is serving the grain inside of it. Why do people package it? To be able to carry it. So it's not called a chatzitza. A curtain, the curtain is not here to service the grain. Fakert, the curtain is here because let's say that I want a pile to remain separated for whatever reason. So I put a curtain to keep them separated. The curtain is here to be mafsik. One might have argued that it's not like Chamisha Sakin, but he makes that comparison, and since it's getting late...
What about a sign? Putting a sign that this is Tameh. It's serving everything.
Tum itself is mafsik. A sign for sure is not choitzitz. Very good. A sign is not choitzitz. Now, let's go weiter. We have a few minutes. Let's begin. Everything we learned is only the Tanakama. That's the beauty about all this. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, I'm just quoting the words of Rabbi Eliezer. We're speaking about Tohoir al Hatomei, that Toirimin min Hatoir al Hatomei. Don't think that Rabbi Eliezer completely argues with the Tanakama. He does not. There are 2 understandings. Beshitas Rabbi Eliezer. We'll begin one today and we'll continue one tomorrow. Tani says the Gemara. We learned in the Braisa. Now, Rabbi Lai, that's a Tana. Oimer mishum Rabbi Eliezer. That what did Rabbi Eliezer mean when he's lenient? Listen to these words. Toirmin min hatohir alatomei only belach. In Hilchas Shabbos Bishul, lach and yavish means one thing. Here it means something else. We don't have enough time to go into Hilchas Shabbos right now. We have a minute, but let me say the following. Lach over here does not mean, according to the first understanding, liquid truma. You know what liquid truma would be? Oil, wine. No. We're speaking about produce that's moist. Moist produce then was handled already in a utensil. I'm speaking common sense. Something that's dry, I know today, doctor, everything is packaged. And packaging was expensive. Not everything was packaged. You packaged something that you needed to package. Now, something that's moist is much harder to handle. You're going to get moist. You're going to soil your clothing. Since lach, this is the word, guys. Since lach has to be anyways handled with a keli, what did we learn up until now, min hamukaf? It's beautiful. We learned that if something is in the same utensil, even if it's not touching each other, it's called min hamukaf. Why can you not be toirim min hatoir alatame? Because you don't want to add to tuma. You have to make them touch. Well, if lach is going to be handled in a keli anyways, it's easy to handle it in the same keli without it touching each other. Gewaldig. So that's why he was lenient. But when you have a product that's not moist, was much more common for people to minimize the packages when needed because it was expensive. Today, the people that are worried about polluting the world, they have the same mentality. If you don't need it, don't use it. There's a much bigger fear when you're handling something unpackaged, because if it's unpackaged and you have the din of min hamukaf, what might happen? You're going to make them touch each other. It's very logical. You know what Rabbi Lai says that Rabbi Eliezer's leniency was only belach. For example, he gives a great example. It's a Rabbi brother's not here. Let's chaparai. If a person had the olives that were being submerged in vinegar. Thank you, Rabbi Brot, for coming a minute late. Now, Chevra, we're speaking about olives that are tamei, and where are they? They are in a bottom barrel tamei. Now, I have olives that are tahor in a different area. You have to do min hamukaf. Let me show you a way where you can combine them, actually, without putting them in the same keli. But everything is being handled in a utensil, even though there will be a minimum amount of added tumah. But it's going to really limit the added tumah. Let me tell you a very simple rule. For food to transmit tumah, the food that is transmitting tumah has to have the size of a kibetza. Whether the shear of a kibetza is even to be able to contract tumah, that's a machlokes rishonim. Let's just say that even though we're going to go in our Gemara, according to those that say that any size of food that's moist contracts tumah, it cannot impart tumah unless it has the size of a egg, kibetza. So it says the Braisa, this is all at Rabbi Eliezer. If you have a bottom barrel of olives that is being it's being pickled in vinegar and it's all tummy, so it's moist. That's the meaning of lach. And you want to give the kohen something that's tahor. Let's follow the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. You can do it. Why? Maybe mashbech she'ein b'fif kibetza. You bring a funnel. A funnel was a utensil that was commonly used for you to transport moist olives. You don't want to get wet. What's the advantage of a funnel? The advantage of the funnel is that the bottom is very narrow. We want for both olives to touch, the toit and the tummy. Where will you squeeze in the funnel? You squeeze an olive or two. The olive or two stuffs the funnel, but it's open. And you touch those on the tummy. Now, will the two olives in the mouth of the funnel acquire tumah? If you say that you don't need the shear of a kibetza, yes, that doesn't matter. Notice, we don't mind if there's a little bit of transmission of tumah. Maybe mashbech she'ein b'fiv kibetza. Umamali oisei zeisem, and you stuff it up with tahor olives. All of it is tevel. And now v'noisni al pi achavius. Now there's a contact. The nimtza toirem min hamukaf, without you making all of the olives on top of the funnel tamei. Why not? Because for the olives to impart tumah, the item has to have the size of a beitza. There's no size of a beitza here. Why do you even have to have the mouth of the funnel smaller than an egg? Even if the mouth, the Gemara is asking, has the size of an egg, who cares? An olive is less than an egg. An olive is less than an egg. So there'll be 3 or 4 olives stuffed in the mouth. It's a bigger mouth. It still won't impart. Are they not crumbs? Are they not less than a kibetza? And a chanami. They will never impart. Why do we want a funnel with the smallest mouth? Because we want to minimize even the olives in the mouth of the funnel. Find the funnel to minimize tumah. But for sure, the ones that are on the top of the funnel will not become tamei. Bottom line is, Rabbi Eliezer's leniency that you're toidim in a toid ala tamei is only belach, but not yavesh biyavesh. Since they are normally transported outside a keli, we are afraid, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, because of min hamukav, that you're going to touch one or the other, and you're going to make everything tamei. God willing, tomorrow another understanding b'shitas Rabbi Eliezer.